Hello and welcome to the Simply Smart Business Podcast. I'm your host, Nicki Ong, and I'm thrilled to have with me today Katie Merriman. She's the Director of Brand Marketing and Communications at the Impact Partnership. We're going to be talking about a lot of exciting things with Katie. We're going to talk about flexibility in marketing and why it's really important not to be afraid of innovation. We're also going to talk about critical thinking, being imaginative, but also using your critical thinking brain, as well as being a sponge and being prepared for any type of audience that is put in front of you. So welcome, Katie. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're so thrilled because I can already tell that you're going to be full of amazing information. But I always like to start with a little bit of story time because it's important to, I think, see where you started from and where you're at now. And I think you have a very cool story because you started off in a totally different industry. So can you take us back and tell us where you started and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I was really big into musical theater growing up. And so I was going to go into theater, but I majored in college in broadcast communications and journalism. So I was actually about to fax a contract for a 6-week cruise ship stint when I was going to graduate. But I sent out one demo reel to one small local news station in Sarasota, Florida. I love you, ABC. I was about to fax this contract and move to New York and make it on Broadway. And my old boss from ABC7 called and said, "Would you want to interview for a job as a news photographer?" And I said, "Yeah." I immediately just ripped it up and went. And so that's really what started my constant yeses. When opportunity presents itself, no is always no, but yes is always an opportunity, right? I would started in local news and eventually moved to Atlanta and worked at CNN and TNT and TBS, and then bounced around a little bit between advertising agencies. And then I ended up at the Weather Channel, and I was introduced to a gentleman who is the director of television for my current job, Impact Partnership, just through a mutual friend. And I had just started at the Weather Channel, and he wasn't looking, for any like an editor or anything like that. But we just decided to, hey, meet. Networking's great. Again, always say yes. Why not?
Yeah.
So I thought we were going to meet for maybe 30 minutes, and it was kind of toward in the middle of COVID, so it was like distance meeting, things like that.
hmm
30 minutes turned into 3 hours.
Wow.
And I mean, he introduced me to just everybody in the company. There's about 120 people in the company.
Wow.
And I spent some time with the CEO and the president of the company. We talked about baseball and music, and something that, the CEO of Impact really takes seriously is
Mm.
workplace culture. And he and I are very similar. We believe most skills other than, brain surgery, pretty easily taught. We can train most skills, but you can't train being somebody that I would want to have lunch with, that I would enjoy working long hours with, right? So, but that was it. Just a nice to meet you. And then 6 months later, I had actually just lost my dad. My dad had just passed
Mm.
away. It was about a
So
week
sorry.
after his, no, that's okay. That's okay. Thank you. But it was like a week after his funeral. And I got an email from Stephen Odom, the CEO that I had met 6 months prior, maybe a little less, but he said he had sent me an email. He downloaded my resume from LinkedIn, and he plucked out the broadcast journalism words and put in financial marketing. And he said, if you think you can do this job, then I'd like you to meet our chief marketing officer. And
Mm.
I was not in a headspace where I had any interest in learning anything new. I mean, I just lost my dad. I was in such a deep level of grief.
Sure.
And a very good friend of mine who's been instrumental in my career, Jamie, she said, "You're not making decisions for current Katie, you're making decisions for future Katie.
Mm.
So you are a yes person. You say yes, because if it's a no, it's a definite no, right?" So I did go meet Alex House, my current boss, and I don't even know what happened. I blinked and here I am. It's been 4 years later. And this is actually the longest job I've ever had in any one position. Because in production,
hmm
you'll move around a lot. Like when I worked in television, yes, I worked for one company, but in 5 years with that company, I had 6 different jobs. It's very customary to kind of bounce around. But I've been with Impact Partnership, a financial marketing organization for independent financial advisors, for just crossed the 4-year mark. So, and it's been great. And that's, yeah, never once. I was going to do Broadway, but now I'm doing marketing,
Yeah.
B2B marketing for a financial marketing organization. And I've had a great run. And a lot of it's just been like Stephen Odom, the CEO, my friend Jamie, so many people investing in me along the way. It's been a
Mm.
lot of luck and a lot of saying yes, and a lot of, people, paying forward their good fortunes to me, and then it's on me to do the same. So, and mentoring.
Amazing. I love that so much. What a cool story you have. So tell me a little bit about how that story plays into a lot of your philosophies, because I'm very much in line with the way that you think about marketing. And I think a lot of us have come away from it. And the first thing being not being married to anything in marketing and having that flexibility. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't have the kind of traditional marketing experience that coming into this job really required, I think. What's great about this company is they have things that they believe are tried and true and work and are proven to work for the industry they're in, but they want you to innovate. That is so important. And I'm somebody who's constantly curious and I ask a lot of questions and I end up in rooms and meetings that I'm not sure I should have been in the first place, but they let me come and then I end up staying. So, yes, I working in television production, working in TV in general, entertainment in general, so much changes every single day. I always
Mhm.
use edit software, an example here. Lots of people were nervous moving from Final Cut Pro to, Adobe Premiere. The fundamentals are, yes, all the same, just shortcuts change and things like that. So you still have fundamentals, regardless of what kind of marketing job you're in, that will always be the same. Storytelling. Any good marketer knows nothing matters if the story isn't told well, right? You're never going to
Mhm.
connect with your audience. But you can't be married to the technology. You can't be married to what worked for you 5 years ago. If you are kind of committed to only one way of doing things, you're really going to get left behind. And I think marketing requires a thicker skin because, as we know, I always use the analogy marketing is golf, right? Very few people who play golf are good at golf, and it's
Mm.
hard to be good at golf. Marketing's the same way. You will try so many different swings, so many different ways, and some will, go off the fairway, some will end up in the rough. In fact, probably most of them will. Most of your campaigns will not be what you thought they would be. Like, it was such a great idea. How did that not work?
Mhm.
Um, but then you'll have like one really good swing and it really, really works. And you're like, well, I got to do that. But as you know, you have a whole toolkit, you have a whole bag of clubs you can work with. So,
Mhm.
not getting married to it, being flexible and being a critical thinker, being able to say, this doesn't work anymore, or maybe this is a great idea. Lots of people like to be in creative meetings and have ideas. I always say I don't care as much about big dreams as executable ideas. Like, what can I execute on?
Mm.
That's always important to me. And that kind of again falls into the being married to stuff. If you're emotionally attached to a lot of this stuff, it's going to be really hard to get good at stuff if you are super sensitive and not willing to get a thicker skin and try new things and really build your muscles around the different new avenues of marketing and in different
Mhm.
industries of marketing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And honestly, I see so many entrepreneurs, even in the game for many, many years, either pigeonholing themselves into one format.
Mhm.
They say, well, we've been doing billboards for 20 years and it's worked for us. It might be time to try something else, right?
Yeah.
Or marketers or entrepreneurs even that try to do everything under the sun and try to have the next viral video or try to have that hole in one to use your golf analogy. And that isn't always going to be the ticket that gets you success, right? So tell me a little bit more about the thought of uh, being being imaginative, but also having those critical thinking skills and balancing the two.
Sure. Again, I think it's so important to be creative. It's so important to think outside the box, but that critical thinking piece comes in a couple of prongs. It's again, what can you execute on?
Mhm.
I want to shoot a video with a hot air balloon and somebody dangle, some big stunt, but you have $150 budget.
Mhm.
I think it's important to be imaginative, but use your critical thinking skills about what you can execute on and what will actually work for your audience. And a lot of
Mhm.
that also requires a good bit of organization and tracking, which I know people hate to track the
Mhm.
results. It's hard because most of us are understaffed or super busy or just we're constantly in that hamster wheel and grinding, moving, and it's hard to kind of take a breath and say, well, we know this worked, or we have data to show that this, moved the needle a little bit. We're just always again, wanting to be creative and not really taking a step back and thinking about what makes sense, not just for the audience, but for your team as well and for your company as well. Does the messaging that or the big dream that you have really expand your brand? Does it tell the story of your brand well, or is it just a really cool idea? So I think that's where I come from a critical thinking standpoint. And it's hard because a lot of campaigns, depending on what kind of marketing you do, I always try to add one more thing. So if we do like some kind of print or like gift campaign of some kind, I always try to find a way to add an email touch or a video portion or something like that. But I have to think about the actual customer journey and experience. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of marketers, and not just marketers, in all industries, we're always looking at our competition and we don't think about the customer first and think about the customer
Mm-hmm.
journey and how they're receiving whatever it is we're sending, whether it's a digital ad, an actual physical gift. And that's really been something that I've leaned more into, is really just caring about how they're receiving it and their perception, and less about what's the competition doing. What if we never cared about them? What if we just did it our way? And of
Yeah,
course, I mean, you always have to have a finger on the pulse of what other people are doing. But
absolutely.
in terms of building out your campaigns, really thinking about how the customer journey plays out truly from beginning to end. I know people like to talk about funnels. I don't love buzzwords, but yes, from top to bottom of the funnel,
Yes.
or the wheel, or whatever buzzword you love for marketing. I just truly think of, if only one person gets this, what do I want them to think and feel when they see it, get it, read it, whatever it is.
That's such a great reminder. And I love the idea about thinking about competition in a sort of beautiful way. I've noticed over the past 5+ years that a lot of my clients, when I go to ask the question, okay, tell me about your competitors, because I like to look at them and make sure that, we're doing at least everything they're doing plus a whole lot better. A lot of my clients these days are saying, well, I don't really think of anybody as my competitor. They've really got their blinders on and they're just focused on their people and building a great product or service or business. And I love that, because I think it's really easy to get sucked into that competitive game and looking around at what everybody else is doing instead of focusing, like you said, on your audience. And you mentioned your audience, about how that's really shifting at impact from baby boomers to Gen Xers. So take
Yeah,
us through that journey a little bit about really looking at who you're talking to.
I really love it. So when I worked in television for a long time, news and entertainment, your metrics for a demographic are age, gender, and maybe one other metric, depending on whether you're working in news or entertainment. But that's that casts a wide net of interest, and it's really hard to dial in meaningful messaging when you are trying to talk to a 25 to 54 is your demo. Then a 25-year-old woman and a 54-year-old woman care about very different things, so it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
really dial in messaging that way. But now I have a very niche audience. And yeah, when I started here about 4 years ago, the vast majority of our clients, and still now, are baby boomers. They're business owners, and they've been in the business for, a couple decades, and they may not have owned the business at the start, but that's where they're at now. And
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking about a succession plan, how to leave. So that's a piece. That's a marketing piece too, is how to get them to move their business and that kind of legacy move. Because another big factor in the financial space is a lot of these independent financial advisors, a lot of these business owners, it's a family business. In fact, I would say a big percentage of our clients work with their husbands, wives, and children. So I think that I get to see a lot of mix in terms of generation. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, how you market to a baby boomer is obviously going to be very different. And I asked my boss that very early on. We're doing a lot of traditional marketing, which is great, but how are we not only going to market to this next generation, but how are we also going to serve the next generation?
Mm-hmm.
Like, once they're with us, once they are in our building working with us and become a client, how a baby boomer runs their business is going to be very different. And the needs that they have are going to be very different than maybe how a younger Gen X business owner would run their business, and like the
Mm-hmm.
amount of communication they need, and the amount of direction they want, or assistance that they require. All of that is true. So yeah, although I will say this, don't sleep on any generation and what they're willing to learn about, because baby
Mm,
boomers are pretty tech savvy now. So I don't want to say be good at everything, but be good at everything, really. And don't assume that you're going to miss out on something, or don't assume that because you do one thing, a certain way, that you're going to lose an entire audience. Baby boomers, we have, especially on the B2C side, we know that our clients, so retirees, because
mhm,
financial advisors, obviously pre-retirees and retirees are the bulk of their clientele, they're on YouTube a lot. You wouldn't assume that, but the way that television, the way that people get television now, that streaming, YouTube is very popular, YouTube TV.
mhm,
So a big part of that is when your clientele, whatever your marketing industry is, whatever your clientele is, you always want to be thinking about maybe like 5 to 10 years ahead, right? Because baby boomers right now are getting ready to retire. In fact, I think the youngest baby boomer is in their 60s, like early 60s. So you're talking about they're at the back end of their career. They're getting within a couple years of retirement. So how are we going to market to and support, once they are our client, Gen Xers? Because again, the needs of baby boomers are going to be very different than Gen Xers, also very different from millennials, because I'm an elder millennial. I'm 40. So, and we
mhm.
do have some great millennial advisors who are just doing incredible things and trying new things, and you have to service that market. So it's great that we have a more niche industry, but you still have to be willing to talk to all of them, serve all of them, and not assume that all of them are the same, right? Like, so not all baby
Mhm.
boomers only care about handshake deals. Some of them are very much are digital ads. They're into it. They want to know more, or they want to meet you face to face. And a lot of millennial advisors want to come in and meet you face to face. It's not enough to
Mhm.
just send an email, right? So they're not willing to just do business digitally, despite being, digital natives in that age, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's so interesting. And I think this is something that is lost in the current generation of marketing is
mhm,
that we don't ask enough questions of our audience. We don't,
right,
get on the ground level with them and actually talk to them as people, right? We're not actually getting curious enough about what makes them tick, what are they interested
mhm,
in. Like as a personal example, I do not like to have any sort of touch points with businesses on Facebook. Like that's a purely personal space for me, and I don't like to do any business there. But get me on Instagram, and that's where I do all my business
right,
stuff. Right.
right.
So, and that's just me personally, but I know a lot of other elder millennials are kind of similar in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And I lean more towards like the Gen X baby boom, because I mean, I was raised by baby boomers, right?
Yeah.
So
Same.
again, thinking about how really putting yourself in the shoes of your key demo is wonderful. But I also think just in your personal life, and I don't love giving advice, unsolicited advice, but here I am. I think it's so important to, in your personal life, have a diverse friend group and network of humans. Like, I can't tell you how beneficial it is to have people in your world open up your mind and worldview and how that affects my day-to-day job. A great example was, I mean, even having my parents and friends of my parents who were very involved in my life, when I would do local news stories, something, controversial or maybe violent or something would happen in the community, we'd be editing out the story and I would call my mom or dad, or I would call one of their friends and say, "Hey, we want to run this story and this is kind of where we're going with it. What are your thoughts?" And they're like, "Just remember that's somebody's kid. Doesn't matter how old, that's somebody's kid." So I wouldn't necessarily think about that because I was a kid, when I was doing that. And just
Sure.
having a nice, in your personal life, mix it up and be curious in your own personal life and take that into work with you. I think that's just the smartest way to do stuff, because the people around you are also the audience you could potentially be wanting to reach. So it's been beyond wonderful for me. And like I said earlier, I've had just wonderful mentors in my life from various jobs, industries, walks of life. And it's really the benefit for my professional career is unquantifiable. It's magnanimous. I can't say enough about how I would definitely not be sitting in this beautiful digital studio in an industry I had no, like, again, broadcast journalism to financial it's
Yeah.
just wildly different. But again, it's just saying, yeah, I'd love to chat with you. I'd love to network
Mhm.
with you. You know what I mean? Just to get to know you and being
Yeah.
curious and being friendly and being somebody who isn't stuck in their own bubble. That's not saying you have to be an extrovert. It's just saying, you're curious about other mindsets and job, careers, whatever it is.
Mm, that's a big personal pillar of mine. So I love that you brought that up, that it's very
Yeah.
important for me to have a diverse friend group network because I believe that that's how we grow as humans. That's how we
Yeah.
learn. That's how we ask insightful questions. And certainly there's a little bit of conflict there, but healthy conflict is how we grow and that's how we
Totally.
learn.
Totally.
Yeah, I
Well, and I
love
think
that.
I'm not an entrepreneur. I find it wild, like the vision that it requires to be an
Mm,
entrepreneur. I can't imagine a more important thing than an ability to network and being able to reach out to people,
mhm.
and I don't even think of it as cold calling. It's just, again, being a part of something, whether you're part of a book club or whatever it is. You just never know the opportunities that will open up to you when you just say yes to talking to somebody at a coffee shop, because that's also happened to me.
Absolutely.
I was in Chicago. I do a lot of solo travel. I'd never been to Chicago. My goal is to go to all the baseball markets. So I was in Chicago last
I
year.
love that.
Yeah, yeah. And I was at the Sears Tower. Well, I know they don't call it that, but that's what I'm going to call it. It's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
else, but it's always a Sears Tower. And you go to the top and you can get in that glass cube over Chicago and take a
Mhm.
picture. I was by myself. The girl in front of me was very clearly by herself as well. And you only get like 10 seconds. They give you a timer and you have that long to get a picture. Otherwise,
Mm.
the only picture you get is the one you have to buy from them. And I said, "Hey, I'll take your picture if you take my picture." Come to find out, she's traveling from Korea, and now we follow each other on Instagram and I follow her, and I will absolutely visit her one day. And again, that's such a wild opportunity to
Yeah.
be able to do that. And just I'm following her career because she has a really interesting career path as well. And you just never know. To just being
Mm.
open to the people around you and that kind of networking, you don't have to think of it as networking. Just be friendly. Just be open minded and be friendly. And you just never realize the opportunities that will present themselves when that happens. I can't imagine how important that must be for an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's the lesson I give my 6-year-old on a daily basis. I say we
Yeah.
don't have to be friends with everyone, but we do have to be friendly. And
Yeah.
it's wild the doors that will open for you just
Mhm.
because of that. So I couldn't agree more with that. This has been so incredible, Katie. Thank you so,
Oh,
so
thank
much.
you. Just
I
having
want to
me.
wrap. Yes, absolutely. I want to wrap up with any final words of wisdom that you have for our listeners that you can think of that we haven't talked about yet.
I want to bring this back to my dad, if I can, Tom
Absolutely.
Merriman, if you're listening somewhere. He would always say, be brave and cheerful. And I try to do that. I'm not always cheerful. It's really hard to do both at the same time. But you know what I mean? It's being brave, whatever that means for you, if that's trying something new, if it's not being afraid to fail, if it's just whatever that means to you, do that. For me, being brave means what am I afraid of? Whether that's, you know, being a leader in a company. I never really thought I'd be a leader in a company, and I get to be a leader in this company, which is really special. I get a seat at the table. I never really thought I wanted that. But again, just being a yes person and not being afraid to fail has been valuable
Mhm.
to me. My dad his mind would be blown seeing me right now, especially because I never looked at a 401k. I had my dad do that for me. And now my
Yeah.
whole world is around, you know, the financial industry, assets under management. It's just wild. But, you
Mhm.
know, being brave, whatever that means for you, do that. And you got to be cheerful when you do it, because if you cannot find the good, the joy. And for me, I'm not necessarily a happy-go-lucky person, but that cheerful for me just means gratitude. It means like a deep appreciation
Mm.
for the people I have in my life that I would have never met otherwise in any other scenario, and really being where your feet are and appreciating the moment you're in, because it's not going to be the same way and you don't know when it's going to change. Because I
Mhm.
lost my dad. We didn't know that was going to happen. That happened really unexpectedly. So I will end it with my dad. Be brave and cheerful. Also,
Mhm.
baseball is a microcosm of life.
I love that so much. And I'm sure he's so proud of you wherever
Thank
he is.
you.
That's incredible. I love that so much. What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
Oh gosh, I guess on Instagram. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. I'm not very active on LinkedIn. I mean, I check it, but I am also on Instagram. It's Katie May, May. That's my middle name. All my friends call me Katie May. So Katie May, keep it together. And there's a lot of underscores with that. So Katie underscore May underscore keep underscore it underscore together. But that one day, if I ever do get my memoir written, that's what it's going to be. Because my favorite basically line is keep it together. Whatever it is, keep it together. So Katie May, keep it together.
Lovely. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah,
And
it's
I'll, of
wonderful.
course, include all the links in the show notes as well. So it'll be really easy for people to find you there. Thank you so much, Katie, for being here. It was such an absolute pleasure having you on the Simply Smart Business podcast. And to our amazing listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe for more inspiring conversations and actionable strategies to help you build a successful and fulfilling business. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.